Howdy, it's April 18th. It's family law. And to pick up after last time, the biggest thing you're worried about, because you're probably not particularly concerned about today, is the presentation part of the final project. Okay, here's the deal. You can put together 2 short 2-minute YouTube clips that explain your handbook, manual, they call it a handbook, about that is your final project, okay? So I want you to put 2 short clips together, or you can come here and present 2 of them. 2 short, what does 2 short clips look like? Something that keep someone's attention briefly in the YouTube area, and that would mean it is at least 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, no more than 2 minutes. Okay, 2 of them about 2 different things that you think are of fundamental importance in the materials you prepared for someone to know. Okay, so how do you share your YouTube clip with me? Or you can just come here and I'll video it for you in class next Tuesday. Okay, those are your 2 options. You can either do that and then let me share the link with me, and then I will have them to share with everyone. Okay, whether you like it or not, you're sharing them with everyone because you're supposed to come here and give a presentation. So you have your choice. I hope people will attend in person, but I want you to think about 2 1-minute, 30-second to 2-minute clips about explaining some subject in your project. Let's make this helpful to people who are unlearned. Sometimes you'll see me write that on your paper. Tell an unlearned or unlearned person about the subject. Okay? So it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be you could use voice over PowerPoint if you would like. You could do a quick video with animations. That would be crazy. I'd be happy to see it if that's your interest. But it can be something that you draw on a whiteboard. Our governor likes to do that. Okay, draw on a whiteboard. You could do any little thing, but make it somewhat interesting. Do not make it, or make it very interesting. That would be better. Do not make it very long, though. Trust me, we all know that if you watch a YouTube video, you only last for about 1.5 minutes anyway. So remember that. Try to cover the most important items. You know, it could be as simple as showing someone how to file their domestic violence petition or something, right? Or not. Maybe make it fill out some form. How do you do it? Something like that, okay? That's pretty simple, right? 2 different topics, short. I want 2 separate 2-minute video clips, absolutely. You can do that in YouTube. You put it in your YouTube channel. You automatically have one, by the way, by virtue of your wvup.edu address. Okay, it's already available there. You do it that way. You can keep it unlisted if you like. You don't have to make it a public video. You can make it an unlisted. However, you have to have it at least unlisted. It can't be private because then we can't see it. You can send me the link. Okay? So keep that in mind. I will grade it on the basis that it's informative, it's interesting, and it's accurate. Okay? Any other questions, please feel free to ask me. Again, if you don't feel comfortable with the technology, please feel free to show up next Tuesday at 3:30, and I will video them for you. Yes, you still need to submit that. Hopefully it's in an electronic form and you can put it on Blackboard, right? Yes, that'll work. That's the best way. It's the open the easiest PDF version. So you submit the handbook itself in Blackboard. Okay, any questions? No, the final, we also have a final. It's a cumulative final. I don't think you'll be all right. It's an application question. So Marissa asked, so we can do like a voiceover video of our handbook, like showing it on Word. Yes, if you want to do, but I want it to be limited to a couple of key areas that you feel are key areas that someone maybe is either complicated and you know, it takes you a little bit to understand. You've been through this class, so it takes you a little bit to do that. But you could show like I do, where it's basically voice over the video of my outline, that kind of thing. You could do that. But again, make it short so that it's short and to the point. It shows a few things. You know, I understand we're not technology folks, but or we might be, but you know, we're not all trained in exactly how to make it all glitzy with that. But you could use PowerPoint, or you could use the Word, something like that. Okay. I'll share this by email as well. That my directions on this generally. Okay. Any questions? And yes, there's a final. It's cumulative. It's going to be an application. It won't be a multiple choice. It won't be 10 questions or anything. It'll be probably 1 or 2 questions that give you a fact scenario. It'll be time to drive you crazy, but the nice thing about finals is they're 2-hour finals. So you'll get 2 whole hours of time clicking away, okay? Just to drive you nuts, like nails into your skull or something, right? Like water torture or something. Not waterboarding, water torture, okay? All right. Any questions about that? Let me know. Send an email if you're watching at home, or you want to write another little message in the side. Okay, so let's talk about, I think just, this is really kind of the end of the story about family law, because this is like a whole different universe, in my opinion, about what is family law. And that's why I sent you to do 3 things, look up those 3 areas to see where there was. So I kind of want some discussion about that, but more or less we already know what torts are, right? Everybody feels comfortable with what a tort is. My old joke is it's not a French pastry, it's actually a civil wrong. Okay, I put that on the outline so you understand that it looks like criminal action, like somebody's hurt usually. Typically torts, we look at someone's damaged physically is our most popular ones, but we know that we have these concepts. They go back through time, and the historical one was the alienation of affections. And what was alienation of affection? Basically, when someone steals your spouse, right? Right, but now you sue the person who takes your spouse. That was the kind of the general concept. Okay, is there another tort you've ever heard of that's related to that subject? You take something of mine, okay, that's conversion, that's an intentional tort maybe. But one of the things that you'll also see is with alienation of affection is I'm engaged to a person and then they break off the engagement and marry you because you had an affair with them or something to that effect. What do we call that? You ever heard of a tort that's related to that? That's not marriage, but maybe has to do with business. No, it could be no, it's not a contract yet.
Breach of promise to marry.
Breach of promise to marry. Okay, that's in this content. But breach, or it would be interference with contract is the tort. You could sue somebody for interference of contract. You could, you know, to lose the opportunity lost, or you know, interference with a business opportunity, things like that. You see those in other areas, and that's where it comes from. Basically, is in contract law. Really, it's tort law, but it can be related to these business opportunities, things you could get, someone takes from you, and that's kind of the concept that you see. Okay, so just seeing that historically, it does have a basis in contract law in that contract context, and also in property, we also see where someone has either breached the duty of loyalty. You know, you've ever heard of breach of duty of loyalty? When you work for a company or you're their agent, you can't take advantage of those opportunities. You know, by getting them for yourself, you have a loyalty to your employer. You have a loyalty to those people for whom you have a, I'll think of it.
Duty.
Yeah, a duty, fiduciary duty, right? When you're a fiduciary, you can't do those things. Well, those are similar things that you see in this area. Just looking a little bit at intrafamily torts, we have the interspousal immunity. So basically, spouse can't sue each other while they're married. Okay, you basically can't sue your parents. Okay, now still there's some historical basis for that, but at the same point, in today's world, what we see with torts a lot of times is that spouses do sue each other, and parents and children do sue each other. And why do they do that? Because there's insurance money. So in the history, we used to say, well, we won't let you sue your spouse because that's crazy, right? Well, let me give you an example of if you're in a car accident and your spouse was driving and your spouse is injured and you are injured, shouldn't you be able to be compensated for that?
If you're still married to that person?
Yeah, you're married, you're in the car accident, you're in the same car, right? You both are injured.
Not sure how my husband would take to that. You know what I mean?
That
Might be
you'd
the kind of
sue
the
your
end of the-
husband?
Yeah, it might be the kind of the end of the
You
marriage.
jerk, you terrible driver, I'm suing you for hurting me in the car wreck, right? Okay. I follow that concept. I follow that. Makes sense. It seems like an emotional consequence, right? Like, would you normally sue your parents or sue your spouse? No, you wouldn't, because they're going to get mad at you, right? But if you're in a car wreck, amazingly, in our minds today, we would say, oh, that's a no-brainer. Sue them. Why? Why are you suing them? Because you have to sue them in order to get to the insurance money, right? Not to say that that's the only reason this is the insurance money, but we're recovering for injuries. So that's the availability. You're not going to sue your spouse and dip into your own checking account to cover your injury. You wouldn't sue them in that case. That's just going to cause bad blood, right? So you have that kind of stuff. So just thinking about those concepts. Today's world, those things kind of went away because of that added wrinkle, in my opinion. There are sexual torts like the transmitting of venereal disease, right? That's kind of an interesting one. You could sue people in that. You probably don't see a lot of those.
Do spouses sue each other over that?
No, I bet they can't.
Can you imagine?
I bet they can't because actually, by law, a communicable disease makes your marriage what?
Oh, Noid or void or no?
Noid, Zoid the
Sorry.
Noid. Do you remember Zoid the Noid? Anybody else remember Zoid the Noid? You don't remember that one? Who was Zoid the Noid? He was the Domino's guy.
Oh, okay.
He was the little thing.
Yeah.
They were trying to avoid Zoid the Noid for Domino's. And he didn't represent Domino's. I think he was trying to he was the evil other pizza companies or something.
Oh.
Anyway, he was their gimmick for a while. He was pretty cool. He was kind of like having a gecko, I suppose, but before that time. So yeah, it makes it Zoid the Noid. Void, yes. And what do you do if you have a void marriage? You get it divorced? Annulled, right? So typically, if you get a venereal disease and that it pre-existed the marriage, it means that it could be an annulled marriage. Okay, just giving you that. But I suppose you probably wouldn't have it very often in marriage. That would be kind of a strange thing to then expose to the world. Okay, strange choice of language. Expose. Okay. Typically, you cannot get tort claims. You can't sue your spouse in a divorce. Why? Because we have no-fault divorce now. So we kind of resolved any of those things that we would dislike about each other or that we want to sue each other over. We would resolve it through the process of property distribution and all those things. Okay. So we generally do not have that. Prenatal torts, can you sue for injuries that occur while you're but in the prenatal period?
Well, wouldn't that be where wrongful pregnancy or wrongful birth rather come in?
That's where we start to come into that side. We have some injuries that are, intentional, right? That you're attempting to have an abortion or something to that effect, and there's an injury caused. There's also, you can definitely sue over things like an unborn baby. You can sue after they're born if there's some kind of impairment that results from some other action.
That wrongful life. Is that the one? there's a slight distinction. One is the parent sues.
Right.
That's the wrongful.
That's the parent has the authority. That's the wrongful.
And then the other
birth.
one, wrongful life, is when the child does it.
Right, when the child sues because the child is suing because of its unwanted life.
Now, it didn't specify an age on that. What is it? I mean, does it matter? Would it be like a guardian on behalf of the child, or I don't?
I would assume that once that child reaches age 18 and is no longer a child, I would assume that that person would no longer, it wouldn't make sense for that person to sue for their own wrongful life, because at that point, they're their own person. So really, I don't know, that's a weird one. These are weird because it goes against the fact that you exist to then sue over that, right? Right, so I should be compensated for, and then how do you calculate damages in that case?
That's what I say. I put a price tag on that.
Right, so you also have the wrongful death ones that relate to viability and whether or not you were, killed in some fashion, right, prenatal, right? There are lots of ways that can occur, but it has to do with viability and those things. These are complicated subjects because wrongful death exists in for people that are already born. Obviously, if you were killed in some fashion, whatever that is, medical malpractice might be one of those ways, but it could be anything: being shot, stabbed, hit by a car. Right. Yeah, that's the one that he was found not guilty of, but liable in. Right.
Which is
It's the same thing. The jury in that case determined that he killed his ex-wife and Ron Goldman, and then the family sued for compensation for that wrongful death, right?
I never figured that out. I mean, unless they were just trying to make a point. How is money ever going to sue and take away the pain?
Okay, well, let me give you an example that probably makes a little better sense in terms of why you might sue. Let's assume you go in for a medical procedure and the doctor commits medical malpractice and the person passes away.
No,
okay?
That's different. I'm talking about like you can't bring a life back, and how is money going to satisfy?
Well, that's the same. To me, it's not different.
Really?
I mean, it's a different type of tort. Typically medical malpractice is a negligence action, right? But it's that kind of a tort. OJ's case, if you believe he's guilty, right, that he killed them, okay, that would not be it. Maybe he says if he did kill him, right, kill them, and then it was a negligence, but it was an intentional tort. But wrongful death has those different things. You have wrongful death and strict liability, right? Because I am strictly liable for, polluting the water or something, and it killed you. That's wrongful death, strict liability. You could have wrongful death or negligence through medical malpractice as an example, and then you could have one through negligences, which would be, negligence would be medical malpractice, and then you have intentionals when I did it, like, I shot you. Okay, that's a crime, right? We know that's a crime, but it's also a tort. What tort is it?
It's
not assault. Depends on the state. Some states say assault. There is only assault.
Assault and battery.
Assault battery is the one that's when you actually get hit by it. Okay, just give you an example. But wrongful death fits in those. So how does that relate to a prenatal tort? Well, there's lots of things that could cause that. We see those as class action suits. The inability to, or not inability. There's some kind of a miscarriage as a result of maybe a strict liability tort, a negligence tort. Okay, that could be something as simple as, not to say it's that simple, but like a car wreck, which ends a pregnancy. It could happen that way, or some other, which would be a negligence type of thing, or an intentional tort. You stab the mother or something like that. That's really wonderful talking. In any event, I think you get the idea. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these three subjects that are interesting, and those are, to me, these are hard to conceptualize, I think, that you have the wrongful life, birth, and pregnancy. So within these, you have this kind of odd circumstance that probably These were all attempts not to either to not become pregnant or to end a pregnancy, right? But it fails in some way. Okay, let's go to the wrongful pregnancy. Have you ever thought about this part? To me, this one is this is that 1% chance that it fails, right? That the birth control fails. You had a wrongful pregnancy. So now you sue the doctor because you became pregnant and you had a healthy child.
Right.
Think about all the possibilities there, right? But a lot of people probably sue over that.
To think about the damage to your child's psyche if they not.
Well, you don't tell them that, but if you get a pretty good recovery, right? It would probably benefit their lifestyle. How many people does that apply to, though? Probably more than we know, because a lot of people are probably going to be like, "Oh yeah, right." But that's because wouldn't that require a fairly high standard to figure out what constitutes a wrongful pregnancy? Like, what would the doctor have had done wrong? Well, let's say they prescribed you birth control, however, it was a placebo. They knew it, or they prescribed you ibuprofen, and you thought you were going to be, you weren't going to be pregnant. Okay, you were on it. Did anybody find any cases of wrongful pregnancy?
I did.
Okay, well, tell us a little about it.
It was James versus Caserta. Caserta? I don't know how you say that.
Oh no, James versus Caserta.
It was back in 1985.
85, okay, 1985 case.
It's a meeting. And basically, it just came down to it combined the elements of all three of those. It was a wrongful birth, wrongful life, wrongful pregnancy. There was something went wrong with one of the sterilization procedures.
Okay, all three types.
So it had elements of each one, and the basic thing it was trying to do was to establish whether or not there was cause for an action in West Virginia law. And basically the answer is they took the general medical malpractice statute and applied it. And because we don't have, it doesn't look like we have specific statutes that address these things.
Right.
But it took the general medical malpractice,
okay,
took that and applied it to this and said that there is cause. And as far as damages go, it doesn't look like they really have a good basis for that either. It's just an individual basis by the court.
Okay, so in the end, this was a case in 1985 where Virginia basically establishes that you could have all of these under the general medical malpractice statutes. So really, none of these are new. They're just applied using what we know as a negligence standard.
That's what it was.
So you're blaming the doctor for something that does the doctor have complete control over? Right? I mean, what do you figure happened in 1985 in Virginia?
It was West Virginia.
Oh, West Virginia said. I'm sorry. I thought you said Virginia. West Virginia used medical malpractice. Okay, so what happened do you think, about the labels in all birth control and in West Virginia after that? After that happened?
It was strictly.
You think each one of them said that there was not a 100% chance that this would work, that there was some failure rate? You better believe it, right? You want to say every one of them got a new label, and I bet they did that nationwide. Whenever these started falling in, they said, heck no, that's crazy. How can the doctor really be blamed for that?
Well,
in that case, what was really the doctor's problem? Was there anything else? I don't know. I didn't read the case, but is there another? What was it that was wrong with what happened?
It looked like it was a negligence issue with the doctor. It looks like that it combined a couple of cases, and I couldn't find the exact citation for the second one, but it was talking about a negligence in one of the sterilization procedures. So one of them went to get sterilized, and something went wrong, and they ended up getting pregnant.
Okay. So that's pretty difficult, right? I mean, there's not a zero failure rate with this. I mean, or I'm sorry, 100% non-failure, whatever. Zero failure rate's correct, I think. But I mean, what's the deal? I don't know. So is that reasonable? I mean, you didn't have a successful sterilization. It must have had some more to it. Anyway, kind of interesting type
That
of
was
case.
the main point, though. Seriously, they went in for procedure.
And they thought they were sterile at
Yeah.
that point, and it turns out they were not.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Something must have been wrong with the procedure, and that's what. Okay. So we don't get a lot of that. Probably the issue in the case was whether or not that was even a valid cause of action.
Exactly, and that was the whole reason I brought it into.
Because the court below probably kicked it and said, "You can't sue for
Yes, they
this
did.
because that's human life. We don't. There's no way for us."
Right.
Okay,
But then the
interesting.
Supreme Court said, wait a minute, under our law, there is, but
There's some
they
room.
stopped just short of making really a determination, you know what I mean, as to different things. They just said, yes, you have right standing,
Right.
so.
Okay. Interesting. So anybody else find a wrongful pregnancy case?
You know,
How about one of the others? Anybody do what? Wrong,
Right, I mean,
wrongful. I think the one that's the most interesting to me in terms of stretching the law is the wrongful life. How do you sue for being wrongfully born?
right. And why would you want to?
Right. Why would you want to? Doesn't it go counter to everything about the fact you now live?
I live, but I wish I was dead. I wish I never.
But is that really what's happening in a wrongful life
No,
case?
I wish I never.
What is the biggest factor? Really, the biggest factor is that you're impaired
Well,
in some fashion, right?
And if it's a severe enough impairment, I could understand that, but at the same time, depending on the level of severity with impairment, does that affect your mind, your brain? It would almost have to be, you know what I mean, someone that just was physically impaired and didn't have the mental.
Well, no, remember this. The wrongful life case is probably brought by your next friend or your guardian, not you as the you yourself, the baby. You know, you're probably a baby at that point. It's your parent or next friend or guardian, however it's termed, depending on the state, that's bringing it on your behalf because of what? You have an impairment that then has medical expense or some kind of associated expenses, right? So there's a valid damages argument there, right? That, hey, I have damages now. As a child, I am not able to live the same life I would be if I was healthy. But aren't there plenty of children born that are impaired? And there was no effect of that. And those damages still exist, right? You still have the same thing. There are children born that need extra care for that matter, right?
I thought I saw something in West Virginia statute code that said that there's an age limit too. Like it has to happen within the first 2 years of am I wrong, of a child's life? Something has to happen if they're going to do something to show proof that there's an impairment. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I thought I saw, and definitely before they reach like the age of 12 or something.
Right. When there's a clearer linkage between your birth and your impairment, probably. It's probably been part of tort reform. Is it in the statute? I don't know that, but if it's in the statute, that'd be what it would be.
It's a little bit unclear in statute.
Right. But this area, the medical malpractice area, is a huge thing in West Virginia, and it got to be fairly broad. And then I don't know if you all are old enough to remember when the doctors in the state basically said they would only do emergent cases. And do you remember that, you all?
I'm old enough, but I don't think I was living in this state.
Right.
When it happened.
And I forget when it was, but a few years ago, the doctors in West Virginia said they would no longer to practice other than emergency cases.
Yes, I remember that. I do.
Because they needed tort reform, and they basically walked out of the hospitals and said, we're not doing it. We're not going to work here other than emergency care. So, okay, any other comments people want to throw in about wrongful life, birth, and pregnancy cases?
I really, for the wrongful pregnancy, as far as I personally believe it, if you have an unplanned child who is healthy, I just don't see, I mean, everybody have unplanned things. When you become a parent, sometimes you become a parent, it's definitely unplanned. Should you seek compensation? That's my point. It's like, I feel like, other than a medical malpractice thing which would cause you to be pregnant, I don't know. I don't like that one.
Okay, so that one's a tough one. It's like, but isn't there a percentage that it doesn't work? Usually, it has to do with some kind of a contraceptive or sterilization, one way or another. That's the part you're saying is unplanned. So, does that mean that if the doctor prescribes you the wrong thing, for instance, is that it? I don't know. Those are hard ones. I think that's a hard one to figure out.
But the thing is, they're not just suing for that. They're wanting to sue for the living expenses of the children.
For their childhood, yeah. That's the part about damage.
That's the part that bothers me. Not. I'm okay with the medical portion of it. Suing.
Right, that there is some problem there.
I'm not okay with. And they actually said that there's a gray area there, because they're concerned about people who might want to sue for future unplanned children.
Right.
I think it's a little bit.
I think that's the biggest thing. It's what we call in law opening the floodgates for more litigation, because a lot of people probably could make that claim, at least initially, that there was a wrongful pregnancy. Yeah, and then maybe you can blame yourself or others. It just depends, right? Okay, so a couple other things that I think that we should hit. Wrongful adoption. This is basically when the adoption agency has misrepresented. Okay, misrepresentation. Knowing misrepresentation is called what? Fraud. So that's an easy one, right? You said that this kid doesn't have physical or mental health issues, but you don't. But then turns out they do. That seems like a natural tort, right? I mean, that's just a fraud suit. Right, it can. I don't know. I mean, anymore they're so regulated that it's probably unlikely, but it could be. There are a lot of, unfortunately, what we know more about with PTSD and some of those things. There are children that have some significant, mental health diagnoses that that haven't manifested until they're removed from the situation that causes them, right? And so that's where states get into issues, because states have taken a child out of a home where there's difficulty, and they only know so much about them because the state's a big place. I mean, there's agents of the state that are working there. That's what makes it complicated. But I don't know. It's probably what we've seen in different cases over time was probably goes back to some of the orphanages. They try to put on the best face for the kid to get adopted, and then you've probably heard some of those horror stories that when the child goes home, then they're just wild and you can't control them.
How does that work with international adoption? It seems to me to be a lot harder to check. I know they do full medical evaluations, don't they? Don't they require that?
Well, it depends on the country, I believe. If you remember a few years ago, there was a lady who adopted a child, I think, out of Russia, and when the child got here, the lady said I didn't want that kid, and sent it back on the plane, sent the child back to Russia, and was like, no. And then Putin got mad at us and won't let any more Russian adoptions to the U.S. over it because.
Well, just take the child. My word, that child needs a home too. Right?
So.
I can't believe she put him on an airplane.
Like, you just go home.
Hey,
yeah,
don't put him on United. They're driving back off and give him back to you.
Yeah, United wouldn't let him fly.
That wouldn't fly.
But anyway, those kinds of things have come up. There have been some horror stories you hear about. Yeah, he is. It's always got something. Thank you for the humor. Okay, so the next one is the concept of consortium, and loss of consortium is the tort, and this is basically the naturally expected benefits of a family relationship. The typical situation here is when a spouse is injured in some kind of a car wreck or any kind of way that they're injured and physically typically, then their spouse and their children can actually sue that same person for this other tort of loss of consortium. And what we know is, what are the benefits to a family relationship? Well, in everybody's family, it's a little different. And those things can be as simple as sharing the household duties, sharing household income, those kinds of factors that play in. And you can sue over that, and realize that that's typically when one person's injured, but their family member, usually it's a husband or wife or spouse, and or children. You don't see the children as often because they usually combine to support them, but they're suing directly, and they can be joined in the same case and sue against that person. You see it in most car wreck cases involving married, when a person's married, the husband or wife or a spouse will sue also as part of that case. Very common. You can sue for loss of services, which is basically the same thing, but it's errands of the child. We've talked a little bit about the heart balm actions and all the things that you can do within that. We don't really know if these are good actions to have. They probably aren't. They're too complicated. The courts don't need to be involved in that. They got other things that are more complicated, but and probably should be more. Yeah, Judge Judy does an awesome job with that. And that Judge Judy was a family judge in New York first, right? You all know that. So that's where she cut her teeth in terms of, that's how she got to be so tough on the bench. Or she maybe was already tough, but that's where she got all this knowledge of how to direct people. And she's made a lot more money being on TV than she did probably being a judge. But
what's criminal conversation?
Good question. I'll look real quick.
Is it a lifestyle type thing?
A criminal conversation exists when the defendant has sexual relations with the plaintiff's spouse.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I've never heard it put that way before.
Yes. So if I hear about criminal conversation, you know what that means. You're suing someone for having sex with your spouse.
Love it.
Okay, so that's an interesting. I suppose that went beyond conversation. Okay, vicarious liability. This is the common. This is common for a lot of different areas, but it has these next two areas: vicarious liability, independent liability, were usually related to car wreck cases. And the reason I say that is that you have the one where you're vicariously liable for the actions of your child. Okay, common example: you let your child go drive your car, and you're riding in it with them, and they get into a wreck. Then you can be held liable as either the owner of the car or as their parent.
It's transferred liability.
It's transferred liability. You see vicarious liability in a lot of things.
Employers are that way, right? If you're on the job.
Yes, vicarious liabilities through employment. Right, and that's what essentially the family purpose doctrine is. It's the same as that employee relationship that you have, this master-servant relationship. Sometimes you'll see in tort law, it's called that, employee-employer liability. If your child is running a family under the family purpose, they're running an errand for the family, then the parent can typically be held responsible for their actions. And usually it's a car wreck case. Okay, that's vicarious. The parent is not being sued because of their action. They're just being sued because they're responsible for their child. Okay? And the other one is independent liability, which means that the parent is actually being sued for what they have or have not done. Okay? In the case of these two, we have negligent supervision and negligent entrustment. Apparently Siri thought I said hi to her. Negligence, supervision, negligent entrustment is when the parent themselves are being sued for their action, and that is what they have allowed their child to take the car. Or they haven't negligent supervision, that's usually entrustment. I've entrusted my child with my vehicle or with my property. Negligent supervision is the typical, is usually in that area of if you leave your child home alone and then they throw a big house party and somebody gets injured, that's the parent would get in trouble because you're not supervising them properly. Okay, or if they get hurt or in some way, the parent themselves is getting sued directly. Okay, kind of a legal distinction for the same level of damages, but you see the difference between those two and how they might relate in those things. Okay, any questions about that? All right, I didn't give a keyword, so how about criminal conversation? Criminal conversation is the keyword for the day. So That was easy. Again, let's to wrap up. Anybody have any questions they want to raise about this subject? This isn't particularly meaty stuff, in my opinion. It's kind of interesting just to give somewhat of an idea how they relate to family law. Not a big thing. Again, next week, please come if you want to present in person, and I'll video for you. That way, when you do your two short videos, 1 minute 30-second to 2 minute videos on a couple of subjects that you're interested in within your project, you can either do them by recording them on YouTube and sharing that link with me, or you can come here and I'll do the video. Okay, we'll do it while we're in class. That may be the easier option if you're able. The other thing is we have a final exam. It's cumulative. It'll probably be 1 or 2 questions that have a fact pattern, and you're going to apply some things from the class. Okay, you'll have 2 hours for a final, because that's what we get in for final exams. Any questions about that? Yeah, we're going to have a timer that really annoys you. I can't add that to it. I'm not a programmer. But.
Okay. Marketing, they have that weird one every time whenever it's the countdown to registration.
Oh, yeah.
That should be giving you
Okay, any questions? All right.